Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Mirror Dungeon 3 hard solo video. In today's video, we are going to be showcasing the new Lantern Don Quixote. I was supposed to get this video done a couple of days ago, but thanks to Project Moon blessing me with the absolute worst boss RNG known to man, it took a little bit longer than expected. Anyway, we'll talk about the failed attempts in a minute, but for right now, let's start off with the typical kit breakdown. Starting us off, we have Skill 1, I Shall Nibble Thee. It's a Gluttony single coin, 5 to 12. On use, gains 3 aggro, and on hit inflicts 2 rupture count. It's pretty standard for a Skill 1, though it is good to note that because all of her skills inflict rupture count, it's very difficult for her to actually break a rupture stack. For Skill 2, Flashing Lure is a Lust 4 to 13, gaining coin power if the target has 6 rupture, turning it into a 4 to 16. It also gains 4 aggro on use and inflicts 1 rupture with the first 2 coins. The third coin inflicts 2 rupture and 3 rupture count if the target has 2 or less rupture count. This skill is her main rupture applier and as a result also her main damage skill. Skill 3, Whirlwind Om Nom Nom, is a Gloom skill and rules the same as a Skill 2, gaining coin power the same way as well. It also has 2 more offense level, which can potentially make it more consistent with clashing. On hit with the first coin it inflicts 3 rupture count, and for the third coin it heals 15 HP and additional HP based on the target's rupture. It also has the conditional where if you are below 50% HP, it reuses the third coin. Though this isn't as useful in practice as it is on paper, the reason being Dawn's stagger bar is at 50%, meaning to get it to activate, you need to be staggered, and in regards to soloing at least, getting staggered is usually a death sentence. Her guard also exists, I guess. It has the potential to heal the remaining shield HP, but it basically does nothing. Her passive, Om Nom Nom, is the reason why I thought this run would be relatively easy. If a skill slot has aggro, it gains +1 clash power. This is almost guaranteed to be active so long as you never use your defense skill or egos, as all of her attacks gain aggro. Whenever she attacks an enemy that was targeting her, she heals 6 HP. Because most of her skills have 3 coins, this usually results in healing 18 HP with every attack, giving her the best and most consistent healing in the game. With that, it's time we start dissecting the run. First boss is honestly nothing. The Ting Tang Gang is probably one of the easiest bosses, even if you were fatal to their damage. So instead, I'll talk about the previous runs and explain why the first floor was such a pain in the ass. Our starting ego gifts are Child Within a Flask and Voracious Hammer. I wanted to take Rupture gifts to start, specifically Thunder Branch, but as previously mentioned, I kept getting poor RNG with the first boss, and got put up against Meryl, who would absolutely destroy me if I could not use Ego, thus making it so I had to search for an Ego resource gift, just on the off chance that I got him as a boss. Though he wasn't the only problem. The second boss that kept giving me problems was the Twin Hook Pirates. The pirates themselves weren't an issue. I could consistently defeat all of them, leaving just Smee and Smee alone. But by the time I got there, however, I always had a very high bleed stack that I could do absolutely nothing about, and always resulted in dying before I could finish off Smee. Oh, would you look at that? It looks like we beat the Ting Tang Gang. What a surprise. Our reward for this is the always pleasant Bloody Gadget. At the first shop, I debate whether or not I want the Rusty Commemorative coin, and ultimately decide it's worth it since nuking enemies' sanity with Fluid Sac is really good. We also pick up Coffee and Cranes, as well as Grey Coat, and lastly Carmilla. Next up is the Floor 2 boss, Ebony Queen's Apple. Huh? What do you mean it's dead? We just started. Okay, anyways, after defeating the second boss, we pick up Scarlet Moths, giving enemies a little bit of a damage boost. You know they'll need it with how easily we can heal. The floor 3 boss is against the King Crab, someone who doesn't just die instantly. He's a pretty tricky boss and honestly probably one of my favorites. Doing pierce, blunt, and rupture damage makes him a significant threat to any identity, no matter how good they are. Turn 1 is pretty straightforward. Every damage type coming at us is pierce, which we don't care about, except for 1, which is blunt. This shell attack from the King Crab not only inflicts a bunch of rupture, but can also potentially stagger us if we let it through, so we have to beat it, and we use Fluid Sac to do so. This not only breaks the attack, but due to the shell being fatal to both blunt and gloom attacks, we end up destroying it in one turn. Commemorative Coin ends up biting us a little here as it duplicates the skill and destroys our sanity. Turn 2, though, is quite interesting. Having neutral sanity and no boost to our clash power means clashing is unreliable. However, this is not necessarily a bad thing. The King Crab is using an AoE that's targeting all of the other crabs, including me, and being nearly staggered means if I don't heal back, I will get staggered and die. Luckily, the King has a second slot on the same part that's attacking, giving me a free opportunity to target it and get the most healing possible. One of the crabs is also using a counter, so when the King does his AoE, he activates it and the crab does part of the work for me. Turn 3, in hindsight, I messed up here. With the amount of rupture that's currently on the King, I could very easily do a skill 3 into a skill 2, which would do more than enough damage to be able to win. Unfortunately, I was not thinking about that. Instead, I saw all of his attacks were targeting the other crabs, and with how low my health was, I did not see the win condition, and instead decided the best course of action was to try and heal and stop as many attacks as possible. Turn 4, the King defeats all of the other crabs for me, though this causes something really weird to happen. They all instantly respawn, directly on top of one another. There are 4 crabs in this pile, and I can only actually target 2 of them. That aside, I choose to ignore the crab monstrosity and do what I should have done last turn. Target the King Crab. There's a weird bug or interaction or something happening here too. When the amalgamation attacks me, sometimes I take 2 ticks of damage from the rupture stack, but then the game realizes it shouldn't be doing that and reverts one of them. This results in me getting semi-staggered, the game then realizing I shouldn't be staggered and unstaggers me. Really weird interaction, but ultimately it doesn't matter, as next turn I finally am able to defeat the Crab King. Our reward is something of a debate. All of the enemy buffs essentially give the enemy +2 clash power, as most enemies only have 2 coins. I was debating whether I wanted Phantom Pain or the Rusted Cutting Knife as a result, but ended up choosing the knife just because enemies could potentially have 3 coins, and I didn't want to give them that much clash power. This also gives us the Grimy Iron Stake. Boss 4 is the Gentlest of Fairies, the Fairy Gentleman. He's not that hard, a pretty easy boss, though he does do mostly blunt damage, which is kind of scary, but thanks to our excessive healing and his low coin amount, it's not that big of a deal. There's not really a lot to talk about with this fight, most of it revolves around getting sort of lucky with clashes, and focusing down one part to stack up as much rupture as possible, as it is our main DPS source. So instead, I'll talk about the 2 other failed attempts that made it this far. Both failed for the same reason: blunt damage. The first was on the 4th floor against the Brazen Bull. I could survive the first turn with a little bit of luck, but ultimately I could not stop him from staggering me turn 2. Maybe if I had painkillers I might have been able to survive, but who knows. The second failure was against the 5th floor boss, the Ambling Pearl. This one is a mathematical failure and is literally impossible for any identity who has a blunt weakness and no evade skill. Lantern Dawn, for example, has 195 HP at level 40. The minimum amount of damage, that's right, I said minimum, that the Pearl does on turn 1 is 133. Turn 2 he has the same skill lineup, so he does 133 damage twice. The only way, and I do mean the only way, an identity with a blunt weakness and no evade can beat him is by having literally every single support gift imaginable. Anyways, back to the successful run. We successfully defeat the Fairy Gentleman and receive Grand Welcome as well as Voodoo Doll as our rewards. At the next shop we pick up Crown of Roses, and along floor 5 we find Standard Duty Battery. At the final shop we take Barbed Snare, Piece of a Relationship, and replace Skill 1 with Skill 2. All that's left now is the final boss of the run, and in this epic final battle we have the ultimate showdown of Lantern versus Lantern. Who has the greater lure? Find out next time, and by next time, I mean immediately. Fey Lantern is one boss that, going into, I had no idea whether or not it was actually possible, and honestly, I still don't really know. This fight is super weird and kind of feels a little bit bugged when soloed. The main point of contention arises from the Charmed status effect, as there is seemingly no reason to when it actually applies it. First off, what is the Charmed status effect? Simply put, it replaces all of your skills with fake ones, and when all sinners are charmed at the end of your turn, you insta-lose. This insta-loss does have a unique quirk to it, where normally when you click the give up button, all your HP and sanity reverts back to what it was before you started the fight. But if you lose with the charm status effect, there is no reversion. From the description of the fairy's passive, it says, inflict charm to the enemy with the lowest speed, number of targets increases with every cycle count, number of targets increases when fairy is restored. I assume the default amount of targets is 0. The cycle count has no relevance in Mirror Dungeon as that's exclusive to Railway, which means the only way to increase the amount of charmed is when the fairy is restored. However, unless it's bugged, it doesn't work like that. There are two ways that I get inflicted with charmed. The first is if I don't destroy the fairy in one turn, I will get inflicted with it when I do eventually destroy the fairy, which doesn't make any sense. And the second time is whenever I stagger the body. Never do I get inflicted with charmed when it actually says I should. It just doesn't make any sense. So what does this mean? I cannot stagger the body, and I cannot realistically stall either. So what can I do? I only have around 4 turns to actually do damage to the thing, so being able to burst it down is really difficult. But thanks to the power of Rupture, anything is possible. I need nearly flawless RNG in order to be able to beat this, so let me explain exactly what needs to happen. Turn 1, I need 2 skill 2s, or 1 skill 2 and a skill 3. Reason being, I need 1 skill 2 to be able to destroy the fairy in 1 turn, as well as all heads hits, otherwise it doesn't happen. Turn 2, I need both a skill 3 and a skill 2. If I have a skill 1, I simply don't have enough damage, and if I have 2 skill 2s, I have too much damage. I need both skill 2 and 3 to be able to win a clash, and do just enough damage to avoid staggering the body. Turn 3 doesn't really matter. The fairy comes back alive, which should make me charmed, but it doesn't, and all I need to do is make sure I have skill 2s or 3s in every slot. Turn 4, I need even more RNG as to actually have enough damage every single coin needs to land. I came this close once before, lost a single coin, and no longer had enough damage to win. This time though, luck is on my side, and all of our attacks go off, inflicting a ton of rupture. Because we staggered it, that means that we are now charmed. But it doesn't matter anymore as the charmed attacks still trigger rupture, which we use to finish it off. Bay Lantern is one of the weirdest bosses to solo, and honestly I don't think I could ever replicate this. It was a miracle that I managed to find a way to win. Anyways, that's how I managed to beat Mirror Dungeon 3 hard using only Lantern Dawn, even with the game trying its best to screw me over any chance it got. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like and maybe even consider subscribing. There will be plenty more solo runs in the future, so I'd appreciate it if you stuck around. Goodbye!